Okay, so I had originally done a posting on the Omnilucid Media site or webpage for when I was live at Cranbrook for the Art in the Botanical Gardens event that we had last weekend, and it didn't post. The audio cut out for some reason, and I'm not sure if that has anything to do with my phone. It's most likely my phone because phone service there was really good, surprisingly. So um, everything I covered there, I'm just going to cover again because it's worth doing because it was a great show. It was a lot of fun and a lot of good came from it. And so yeah, I thought it would be good to talk about the institution itself because after seeing the facilities and the gardens and the general place as a whole, it's extremely beautiful. But there's history there, and you can tell just as soon as you get into the area that there's history there. And so it goes all the way back to early 1900s, late 1800s with George and Ellen Booth. The Cranbrook House and Gardens is a historical landmark. And real quick about historical landmarks, I happen to have some experience with that because I spent 8 years working exclusively with historical landmarks in Chicago, being a general contractor and learning some of the tools of the trade and what it takes to work in an old building, which includes learning how to pull mechanical plaster, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but is unfortunately a dying craft in America, with there being as many old buildings as there is over in Europe and overseas in general. The trade is still alive and well, but it's one of those trades that sort of dies with the coming of drywall and studding, which is a great advancement as far as the ease of what it takes to put up a building, because contrasting to older structures, they take a lot of work. Everything from regular maintenance and to even hanging a picture on the wall is more complicated in a historical landmark in a really old building. You go to pound a nail into a mechanical plaster wall, and you're gonna chunk a huge bit of it out and not understand what you did wrong and how to do it properly. So it sounds less complicated than what it is. Maintaining an old building is a lot of work, especially on the outset. Once you replace everything that you need to replace, you're fine because the structure itself is usually solid. Everything built back then was built to last forever, and that's the big difference. Even again, when you get onto the grounds of Cranbrook, things, as soon as the Booths got to the property in 1908, they started building things, building roads, changing the landscape. And so the construction that you see around and the architecture all is reminiscent of that age. And the Booths in particular were real fond of classical beauty. And so it shows, and because it's actually beautiful. But it costs a lot of money to maintain. And you can tell, and they were doing work at the time at the gardens, which is a good sign because it's also extremely. It takes at least twice as long to do anything when you do work on an old building, minimum. Because when you're working on an old building, what ends up happening is you have to do it in the style of the construction that was done at the time, which means adopting similar techniques or sort of adapting the current materials to look like this old material, the old materials surrounding it. Your job is to blend in as good as possible. You don't want anyone to know that you were there. So any renovation that you do, unless you're doing a complete overhaul, a complete gut rehab job, which it is in itself its own nightmare. If you're not doing that, then what you're doing is mimicking the old style, and that means you have to know how they did it. So gaining that knowledge takes time. Copying the style that you're trying to restore the building to takes time. Everything takes longer. So not only is it more expensive because it takes longer, but it's more expensive because of the materials. And and the way things tend to happen when you're with old buildings like this is everything will be working great, and then it's time for the plumbing to go, and so it all goes, or the electric decides to go, and if you're lucky, it doesn't burn the place down. But when it's time to go, it goes, and it goes hard. And if you're not ready to jump on it when it happens, it could easily take you out. And I've seen old buildings that happens to, with electrical fires especially. It's very common. So that being said, back onto the history of this. The Booths, they got their fortune through publishing and founded what is now the Detroit News. And so through the success of their initial publishing company that George Booth had married into, they were able to branch out, and he started purchasing some of the smaller newspapers, buying up what he could, and it ended up profiting off of that. So they moved into an area in Michigan called the Bloomfield Hills, and it's a very nice area overall. There's a lot of good stuff in that area too. It's named after the estate. Cranbrook itself is named after an old English town that the Booth family came from. So, like I mentioned earlier, they started laying the roads. They started changing the area, and which involved building their estate. So it took till about 1922, from about 1908, till they had their estate built up to what they liked, and decided to branch out from there. And when they branched out, they decided to do so in with the arts in mind, and they founded six institutions, art institutions that are still around now for the education and the arts, including a girls' junior college, science museums, offices for the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. So just the arts in general, they were interested in, and they wanted to preserve. This whole thing was to sort of establish something that would last, and then preserve it for future generations as far as the arts goes. And again, classical arts especially. So one thing that's notable about the Booths is that they dedicated their home and all the contents in it in 1944 to a trust. So they sort of relinquished ownership and dedicated it to a trust, and then lived out the rest of their days in the estate, not as owners of the property. So just because they saw that their time was up, they had done what they could do, and that it needed to continue with other people. So the Cranbrook Gardens and surrounding institutions have all split up into auxiliaries, into their own thing, so that they can sort of it's easier to survive that way as far as the funding goes, because as I had mentioned earlier, these old buildings, they take a lot to keep up. Over the coming decades, since the building of the gardens especially, they've survived almost entirely on volunteers, hundreds and thousands of them literally, to maintain the gardens, and it really shows. It's really beautiful, and so yeah, that's why the art show, like Art in the botanical gardens that we did is important to do on multiple levels. The show, we're a week out now, and the show, after hearing back the numbers, all the numbers were met and exceeded, as far as attendance and profit and just overall excitement about the show. We got more people than we thought we were going to get. We made what they had hoped, and some of that money is going into education, to further educate people with scholarships for the AIFD organization, which matches really well to the values of what the booths were advocating for, and that really matches well with the values I have in art. And so the goal then is to expand. We want to expand the show, and we want it to, it's going to happen next year. We're already talking about it. So the plans are underway. I want to play a bigger role in this. On my end, I want to make this into a painting show and have multimedia things going on, with demonstrations and just a general air of art happening in this garden space. I think it'll foster a community. Just from when I was there painting, people were coming up to me. Now that's annoying for a lot of painters, and I knew that going in, that a lot of people were going to be talking to me. So I anticipated it. So it wasn't really annoying. Because really it's just people who are really fascinated and they want to see what you're doing and they're excited, and it's hard to be in a situation like this. It'd make me a real jerk to be upset by that. So, but I wasn't, because it was always just fun and really good conversation, and I was able to talk about the art in the Botanical Garden show, and it just got people interested, and people talking about their artistic experiences and how inspired they were. And so there's a lot of good happening on multiple layers here. We're promoting good education and supporting good education, supporting the Cranbrook Gardens and their facilities here, which need help and need support and need volunteers. And then there's also more encouragement happening with education as far as demonstrations and the small workshops that they were having here too. So people were learning as much as they were being inspired artistically, just from the sculptures themselves. So we want to do more. I want to do more, and I want to probably look and scout around for painters to see if they want to participate in something like this. It was really good for networking. It was really good for spreading the word about my art in general. So I think something much bigger can come from it all, and I'm hoping, and it's looking like, with all the hard work that everybody did, and the entire family over at AIFD just came down, and everybody worked hard. Everybody did. We were just all there for each other, and whoever needed a hand, they got the hand, and we just jumped around from cool design challenge to the next, trying to see what'll work, and everybody was just in it and really had a good time. And so that's where we stand with that. I think it's a good timing as well, because I mentioned specifically classical beauty, and in relation to what the booths were after in designing the gardens that they designed, and they hired as many local artists as they could, and then brought the rest over from Europe. And we're a big fan of the arts and artisans movement, and just supported the classical tradition through the founding of these institutions, even during a time as it was kind of it's on the verge of going out of style, but not quite, as that works at a bit of delay over into America. But it's coming back. The interest in representational art is coming back, and that's why I think this is even more important, because people are looking for art that's different than what they've been exposed to in the mainstream, with everything that comes with postmodernism, and so people are looking for that contrast, and that contrast requires a lot more skill. Abstract paintings, have their difficulties, and abstract sculpture they're extremely difficult. And this is an art show consisting of mostly abstract foil sculptures. So, you can't. There's only so much that you can diss it, but as far as the aesthetics goes, because it has its uses and it has its own beauty. But as far as the tradition itself goes, in the arts, it is not about skill. It is not about like a technical skill set that advocates for discipline in especially in representation. And so that's why another reason why I think the show is important, on multiple levels, because it shows what a high degree of skill can do, both with sort of abstract sculpture, applying these classical principles of the principles and elements of design, and how they work in a conceptual space with in sculptural form with flowers as the subject matter. So that's a really good lesson to see how that translates in the round, and then at the same time, with the institution itself and with the training I have with classical art, something like plein air painting, which has a long and interesting tradition, it connects well, and with the overall theme, I think, that the show is going for. So those are my plans really with it, and I think it's gonna work out nicely alongside this, and it'll be really fun to see what this turns into. And I think the buzz from it now is going to be big enough, and the pictures that are coming out of it are really nice. We got good media coverage in the area, a lot of pictures, just a lot of pictures. So people are really happy with it. People are really inspired. So everybody at AIFD deserves who helped out with the show deserve a congratulations. Laura deserves a fucking medal. The amount of shit that she had to juggle is Sisyphean. Yeah, and it's been this week of just to give you an idea, it's been this entire week since the show of just sort of like recovering, of like, okay, that's over with. Holy crap, the baby's been birthed. Whew, now you can sort of like, the dust settles, and yeah, you got to keep going. So the aftermath, it's funny. It's in painters have something very similar to this. It's the after opening blues. It's like after you have a big opener, you have like a bunch of your work in a show, and you're there the opening night, and it's just like this high, and you've been working up until this point to make sure all the work's perfect, and you're setting everything up, and then you have the show, and you get a million thank yous and you're awesomes and praise, and you just don't know what to do with it, and then you go back into your studio where it's nice and quiet, and and you feel this like weird empty hole. And it's just this strange void of like, I feel nothing. I don't know what to feel, you know. And so yeah, that's been this week, and then you kind of have to try to do everything that you were supposed to do when you were planning the show. So, but it's been good. So unfortunately, I missed a week with the podcast. So I will make up for it with this and another one that I will be recording tomorrow with Ryan about self-harm. Fun topics. But yeah. Well, thank you for tuning in, and I'm sorry if you missed or if you tried to catch the Omnilucid Media live cast of this at the Gardens and were disappointed by the sudden cut in the audio. I apologize again. Here this is the better version. Maybe not, but it's a different version. Yeah, and make sure to check out everybody else's stuff here at Omnilucid Media. We got a lot of good stuff going on, and a lot of good stuff on the podcasts that we're doing over at Beard Plays with Matt and the Blackheart Paladin with Ryan Eaters there. So, all right, I'll be chatting at you guys later.